Hello. Welcome to another special edition of the Turning Points podcast. We are on the third installment of a series that we've been doing with Alaya, which have just been wonderful and very enlightening and deepening. The deepening understanding of, the dynamic of experiencing life. I'm learning more that she's really about this energy and this felt sense and these identities and objects and the questions that we ask, are all coming from the space of, separation. And she's just really good about bringing it right to the core moment. And there was a couple moments here where, she got me and really brought me to that center space.
It's always a good interview when Sean gets slayed. So she slayed you once again several times, and we're just really blessed to have this series of conversations with her. And she has I don't even want to say different spin on non-duality, because it's really, she has her own flavor of introducing and explaining and bringing you into the present moment, what's alive and what's real and what's now. Enjoy our talk, our third talk with Alaya. Hello, Alaya. Welcome back once again to our podcast. So lovely to see you again.
Oh, it's so good to be with you guys. It's so wonderful seeing you.
I feel very, very blessed to have these conversations and share them with other people, and really just to get to spend this special time with you. Great.
Same. I'm at your feet.
So I had said, I think I had a question. So what does it look like for you? I know you have said to me before, it's never ending. The opening is never ending. And so there's things that still come up, even for you. I mean, there's definitely things that come up for Sean and I, which we will get into. But I was wondering what it looks like for you when things come up. If you mind sharing your internal process, because I certainly have had many things come up for me since I just got back from India. So whether it was in India or since I got back, there's been some little things that I'm happy to share later. And I was just wondering, what is it for you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really good question. When we're functioning from separation, there is somebody there to, it is like a looking at, it's being separate from, right? So when something shows up, there's this apparent process of choosing, right? Or saying yes, or you could say, are you willing, right? And then there is this opening that happens, right? Or this tenderness that happens, right? That isn't created by the separate self, right? It just kind of, the yes is this opening, right? And then what's always here is revealed, right? Is this softness or availability or vulnerability, right? And so there's seems to be a shift, right, that happens from an experience of separation to a direct experience of what's going on, right? And in that, there's like this healing, right, that can happen when we're just simply here, and the energy that's here, and then what was held, right, and its in its way in resistance, right, starts to shift and change. Eventually, as separation falls away, right, then that somebody really ends its functioning, right? It ends its necessity to function. Less and less, there is less of the me, right? And so when me fell away here in this form in a way that it didn't resurrect, because it certainly fell away many times, and then it would resurrect, and there would be this experience of the other, right? And so that was, a lot of times we'll hear like abiding and non-abiding experience, or got it, lost it, right? So eventually, for experience here, it just that collapsed, right? So the got it, lost it, the non-abiding, it's the experience is without the middleman anymore, right? So because when you're here and then there's the other, right? Without the middleman, then it's just a collapse of that, right? The duality of this or that. Does that make sense?
And does that mean like no resistance? As a resistance collapses? Is that?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Right, because it's the resistance that creates it.
Yeah.
Right. And then our openness, and so there's this apparent decision that we're making when we're saying, I want to wake up, or I want to know who I am, right? And so this movement, this prayer starts that movement of that collapsing, right? And that movement of this entity that's the me, right? It begins its apparent journey of disintegration or dissolving, right? With this tenderness, this meeting simply what's here, right? Because it's the resistance of it, right, that creates the experience, or the experiencer, right, or the watcher, right? And then it gets more thick and dense, and there's this experience that is actual reality, right? And that there's a separation, that it's alone, right, from source, from ground of being, this moment, right, this eternal. So when this stops functioning, and it stops functioning when, and then we can talk about there's really no way to like know when or how or time, right? So this is all this beautiful invitation into the unknown, right? Because source and the nature of our being is not really so concerned with those elements or those concepts or those experiences that we have in separation, as the energy that's here and is alive, right? If you check in and you can see, like, where did it begin, right? Where does it, right? Like, where does it end, right? You can, right? It's like you can look outside at anything, and it's not only a mirror back, but as you kind of feel the mirror of it, then the mirror falls away, and the direct experience, it starts collapsing to that eternal nature, the life force that's here, right?
I chuckled a little bit when you said that, because that I think that question. Well, I'll start by saying our conversations have done a number on my experiences,
Yeah.
and I think that what you're saying, that that relationship of direct experience has become more prevalent, more what's the word? More readily available. And so that question, probably over the last week or two, of, well, I've been asking since our last conversation a lot more of, well, then who am I? Where did I start? How long will I go on for? And there is, well, there's always just this smile. I always, that sense of source is a smile. It's just a very gentle smirk, accepting, but, and so I've had that, and I can't find the beginning, not just of me, but I can't find the beginning of anything. And so as you're kind of talking about that process of, when the other comes up, the separation is present. When that dissolves, it seems like it seems like that experience, there's a crowded room and there's always something that wants to take the place of the other that just dissolved. Does that make sense? Is that the same? Because it's very apparent now. It's more apparent than ever, but it's still this, oh, there's another, and to the point where it's like, well, where's this coming from, you know?
Well, that's it. So your curiosity showed up, right?
Yeah.
So maybe some simple words I would say is what's left.
Okay.
Did you see that shift or that transmission, right? Because in separation, it's like, well, why is something else coming up? It's wanting to immediately negotiate with it, right? The ego or superego, or like however you want to. We could use different words there, but it's essentially resistance, right? And so then that middle energy, right, that's coming in and saying, you know, the I, right? Like I have control, or I have wants, or I have needs, or this is okay, or this is not okay. Yeah. So if we lean in, right, to like what's left, right, then what it is that comes in is like what's deeper still, right? Or like what is it that's going on, that's unmet, untouched, unloved, unconscious. So then if you really feel into that, it's very logical, right? That like when you feel and there's something that opens, and that opening, that there's this great, instead of contraction, there's this openness, you know, the unconditioned, this like heart, right? Presence, that it's just like a flow of what arises, right? And so our mind starts to kind of work, or as the negotiator, or whatever word that works for you, separation. Then it starts to work in its way that it's functioning in the past, right? To like label it, or do a should, or put a goal, or things like that, right? And so that can be tender with. That's the energy that's simply here, right? And that's the deepening, right?
Yeah.
It can be, right? It can be just, I say this sometimes, everything but the kitchen sink, and then the kitchen sink, right? So that it's sort of to just blow our mind out, right? Because it's really like taking these thoughts and these ideas and beliefs and our expectations, right? And even down to the words of bad, right? Like you have an energy or fear, right? And then there's a wrongness to it, right? So our conditioning goes so deep to this tightening, this vice that we have, and no to reality as it is. And that's like, well, is it really bad? Right?
Right. And that's
right. Like, is it really bad? Right.
Yeah.
It may not, you know, at the end, what we end up with is maybe a preference. But if it's more than a preference, then there is the negotiating with reality, right? And it's a negotiating with a reality that's just simply reality. As it is.
Oh shit. Okay.
You feeling that?
Yeah, I am.
That it's already a done deal, right? Yeah. And then there's this augmenting, this like layering, you know, and it's a psychological experience that we're and you know, and it's, you know, and it's generally, we use those words like conditioning, right? They're like repeating, right? They're held in a way where it's just, you know, many things are coming and going. It's not that it stays acute all the time, but then what appears again, right, just brings it back up again, right? And then it's like a recycling kind of feeling. But the whole recycling ends, right, when we start it, and it's by grace, or, you know, it arises in us, the fishiness of it all, or the like, I'm really tired of this, or this is, you know, it can be, you know, in resistance. It's I'm in so much pain, I'm turning, right? But this is, I'm in so much pain, recognizing that the turning is, this kind of impulse that we do when we function separation, when we sense into it, we actually are continuing to do it.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying? But the waking up is when we start to recognize it, and then we're waking up to it. Doesn't this continuing to do it doesn't change it, doesn't end it. So potentially so thoroughly, right? Then we're having this what do I do question. And if it's a true prayer, what starts arising is truth, right? Like here we are in these conversations, like we're, everything that's present becomes really much it becomes, the medicine, right? It becomes like what we're drawn to. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And the duty then becomes, I got to be careful walking through this one, but
yeah, so just feel into it, right? Just feel into it.
The action of that awareness is allowing. The action of awareness is feels like holding space for that, to allow when that separation comes up, there isn't that turning away. The awareness allows that fear or energy or pain, whatever it might be, to hold that space for a moment, and then allow it to dissipate, and it becomes less about, well, I wish that wouldn't come up for me anymore. It's not. It becomes less about that. It is. I guess for me, it feels more like a curiosity of curious what's going to come up next, and I like that you added that next level of what's left, because I think in our last conversation we talked about allowing the pain or suffering to be, and then allowing it the chance to heal and dissolve. And the what's left part is interesting. I can't wait to dive into that a little bit more, because that feels like it will allow more ending to happen. Not that ending will end any of this process, but it will allow ending to happen more for whatever is, keeps coming up, and whatever is in those cycles of programming, I guess.
Yeah, it's that's what you're describing as awakening, right?
Cool. Sweet.
Right? Right. So it's like being asleep and it's waking up, right? It's like functioning from when you're feeling, really angry and you really feel it. Then when you speak it, do it, you're just the anger, right? That's all in that moment you are. But when it arises and it's welcomed, and this is simply okay, something really transforms here, right? Many people come and ask me, like, what do I do in this scenario? What do I do in that scenario? And the best medicine I can say is, like, when you feel that anger, right? And there's a movement of returning to presence, right? Because you can only feel it here and now, right? And you can only feel it when your heart is really there's an openness there, right? Like when that starts to open, right? Then there's this whole shift and this whole returning, or this reorientation, this relaxing into our nature. And that's where the wisdom starts to come online. It moves out of the realm of trying to figure it out, or a new program or things. Not that sometimes those things can't be helpful or serve, like, to get closer to this, like in untying knots and things like that. But the real medicine, right, is all in what's alive, what's here, what's, and this energy, that's the what's going on, right? And so it's just this tenderness and this allowing that unraveling has this, and then in the unraveling, healing. And then in the healing, it's actually it has this movement of ending, right? Because, inside of it, it doesn't have any agenda, this holding. It doesn't have any, separate person in there, right?
Yeah.
So when it's allowed, like if you feel energy that's contracted, right? And then that there's this okayness to the contraction, and then just feeling like what the energy does when it's no longer contracted, right? Can you kind of feel that? What happens when the energy is, just check it out. Just energy.
Purity comes to mind. There's a purity in the interaction of the energy of the separation, whatever the separation might be, whether it be fear or pain. There's a purity there, instead of an objectification of it.
Yeah.
And then a sensitivity of course that energy would need attention. Of course it would need affection and attention.
Yeah. And that of course, right? Is it alive?
Is it alive?
Right, because you can say that of course, and it's sort of like in your mind, right? Of like, oh, that makes sense. Which little there, the mind wakes up too. It shifts its perspective, right? But it shifts it in a way where it's aligning to presence, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course is meaning, how could this not be? How could it not be true that energy would need attention? That's what I mean by, it's not a intellectual, of course. It's not something that, it's a felt sense. You get the shivers of like, I'm now awakened to the reality that of course this energy would need attention. And like you kind of talked about earlier, when you don't provide the attention or when you don't hold the space for that, you're turning away. That's an ignoring that energy, and it perpetuates that separation now, and I'm sure that will propagate again then in the future.
Yeah, and that's not a problem.
No.
Right?
Right.
Because it's like there's no missed opportunities, right? And it's like it's very, we can't really know when it gets cooked, right? But there's what happens there is this invitation into the unknown, right? This invitation into, I had a friend who would use this saying, you're always guided, protected, supported, and loved. And really it's this invitation, and Adia Shanti, I heard him say, it's like you get to the edge of the cliff and you just fall off the cliff. And it's like, it's like falling off the cliff forever, right? you may grab onto a branch, right? And that's sort of the, but, right? But our nature really is very organic and very natural for us to live in the unknown, right? So there's that's that deepening, that next, what's left that arises, right?
Yeah.
Like we're going inside of something.
Yeah, I'm curious to explore that, and I like I've been enjoying the gentleness of there's no missed opportunity, that what that holds and what that entails in this experienced process is there's not then shame and there's not guilt. It doesn't add any more to this situation. It's when that separation arises, there's a gentleness, there's a space. And if in that moment or even in a future moment, I realize that I've turned away from that separation and did not have a direct experience with that separation, okay. And that okay, I think you fucked my head up with that okay in the last conversation, because it's like, okay, it's like everything really is okay. And that I think I misinterpreted that because there's a lot of netty, not this, not that. It kind of is that it's okay, everything's okay, but I think for a long time I identified with that as like, oh, so that means I have to be in a space, I have to identify with everything's okay. And so then you think, well, everything's got to be even keeled, and you convince yourself that everything's going to be this just real monotone, gentle life, and then you're like, well, no, it's not at all like that. But that's what I like about the felt sense of this is the felt sense of it's okay is it's okay. It really is okay in that moment, and now you've come to realize, and awakening is happening. Okay, and so it's that real. It's just so gentle and accommodating, that space of okayness, I guess.
Yeah. I like it. I've heard the term felt sense quite a bit recently. Can you tell me about that? Felt sense?
I've never thought about it. It feels like the right term. I think a good example of it when you asked, when I said of course, and you said it's a felt sense of course. That of course is coming from an ethereal place that isn't attached to an intellectual learning. It's this. It's almost like an explosive expression of course. It's way more animated. It's like you said, it's alive. A felt sense is that aliveness as it moves through the language, I guess, would be a way to say it.
So beautiful, so beautiful. And it's so available, right? There's nothing that we have to do for this felt sense, right? Or this when I talk and I'll see, people nodding their heads, and there's felt sense.
Yeah.
Right. It's like,
yeah. And then you say, does that make sense sometimes? And I'm like, I have no idea if it makes sense. Like, I don't know if it because I think usually when that's happening,
maybe I'll start using felt sense, but I think that is the it's a full all being, all that's here, all that's now, right? Is what's being spoken and saying, does that make sense? Yeah.
Well, and it's weird because like I think there's two different ways it can make sense. Intellectually, it can make sense.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of times where the words you're saying mentally are it's almost causing this like glitch in the circuitry. But the body is like there's a lot of times where I feel like I look really confused when you're talking, but the lesson is penetrating to the core. That's what I think felt sense means is I'm not going to be able to write this down for anybody else, but damn, did it really move the spirit?
Yeah. So it's like you're speaking like transmission.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly.
Right? Just really, simple, direct. Mm-hmm.
So, Sean, this might be going back too far, and you might have a more immediate, because we haven't talked for a month, more an immediate example. But I know, like when you had the sale of your house, there was a lot of stuff going on. So there was a lot of opportunity, I think, to surrender and be in the moment. So is there something like that you can talk about that's more specific about this process for you, or that's more maybe immediate? Because the sale of your house, I know, was 2 months ago. So
I would just say, like, if you just close your eyes and you just see what arises. Okay.
Well, I think it's every day there's something that comes up, and I think that it's in this process. It's watching that daily relationship of separation, and I think that what's curious about it is that the separation is so far outside of my like the core of my being. It problems arise more out here, and there's not an identity attached. So I guess when like a more recent thing is, having just past stuff come up. I won't talk specifically, but, family member just bringing up negative things, something that has been resolved many times, but it's resurfaced into something that actually, part of the reason we moved out here was to have our space to be away from some of that kind of stuff. And then all of a sudden it followed us. And so it ignited an anger and a frustration. And, the felt aspect of it was just almost a rage, because I'm just like, how can we, I have this problem with me internally and this is where it kind of, it brought me closer to that self-reflection, but that rage came up and I fully understand why this person is doing what they're doing. It's very present to me. And so I just started, and I wanted to just, of course, like I wanted to send a letter back, just like, and just blow this whole thing out of proportion. But I asked myself, like, is this even real? What reality is this coming from? And I know that it's purely coming from that person's need or whatever they might be going through. And so Meg actually encouraged, she's like, why do you even have to write anything back? Why do you have to even add on to this rage? Why? And so we just decided to burn this letter that I got just to kind of absolve, the physical energy of it. And then I looked at, that frustration of why does this keep coming up? And I realized that I have that inside, that was kind of
there you go. Yes.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So right there, that is that's an awakening, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's that has the invitation of home, right? So you gave some really great words, that you went to rage, right? And so, and it doesn't have to be actually in that moment. That's why it's like there's no missed opportunity, right? Mm-hmm. And then it also came online for you. You were like, oh, this is going to just repeat, right? So this is all really good news. This is all, you're talking about fertile ground, right? For the bowing, fertile ground for, the surrender, right? To say, without the turning from or recycling, right? It's like there's this shift, this like opening, this potential, right? So anywhere along there, then there's this, can it be okay what you're feeling?
Yeah.
Right. And then this is where you find, you know what you need to do, or you know what you need to say. Like really all of that wisdom that comes online, right, comes and naturally reveals and arises, right? And this tenderness with what is here. Yeah. It's separation. It's like constantly trying to, put a circle into a square hole or vice versa. And it's just, and we're really blessed when we really are able to see that is never going to work. Right. And then in that like frozenness of like, all right, nothing I can do is there's a blessing in that. Right. Because that is where we have this fertile ground. I really like that word for what's real, what's really going on for the moment, right?
Yeah.
Right. And then when that occurs, that like opening to the energy, right? That was tight. Remember I was saying like what happens when the energy is no longer held? And this is what we're talking about, right? This shifting where the fertile ground, the like, the not negotiating anymore, right? So it really, the energy just, and then there is here, and then things just change. Like our mind really starts to line, it just automatically lines up with what's occurring in the moment and becomes at service to that, right?
Yeah.
And that's where wisdom comes along. That's where our direct knowing starts to arise, really. And then it's like the actions, either, and sometimes we have to let go of any expectation. Sometimes there's the energy rises and it's just very still and there's no action, right?
Yeah.
Because who knows? I mean, there might be something else that occurs that gives the answer, right? It might be, the apparent events happen, right? Before it's kind of I spend a lot of time in this where there's this energy and it's just not clear to make an action or a move. And if it's not clear, I just don't.
Yeah.
Right. And then you just open to that energy, right? That can also be a challenging energy, right? Just to like the impulse to want to try or the impulse. And then that has such a beautiful, sacred invitation to be tender with that, right? And then our nature really is okay with that unknown, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
No, our nature is our mind seldom seems to be comfortable with that, and that prioritizing that gentleness and that openness and that acceptance that it seems uncomfortable for the mind, and specifically to that situation is when I prioritized gentleness, when I prioritized non-doing, because there was not an apparent thing to do that would solve this problem, right? Because that's what my mind is, oh, here's a problem. What can I do to mitigate it? And there wasn't going to be anything, or there wasn't apparent, and that wasn't coming up for me. So by having a non-doing and just being gentle, then a few weeks later, there has come an opportunity for me to do something for this person that would benefit them and help them. And this person, when I reached out to be like, well, I can do that, I'll help. And this person said, really? You want to do this? You would do that for me? And I said, of course I would, and so that I have not actually had dialogue with that person about the situation. And so they're confused that gentleness has been, gifted back to them, given that they know what they did. And that's confusing to that person. And nonetheless, this gentleness is manifesting and this helpfulness is manifesting. And it's creating a much more softness to the situation simply because I didn't do anything.
Right. Yeah. And so that's what arose, to do nothing. Right.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting when we're authentic and allowing and right to like what's here, and how that karmically changes, right? It's like, because you're describing like a shift in maybe your whole way of functioning, right?
Yeah.
To this other way of functioning. And so that's in our awakening and in our that there, it ends the war, right? It ends the other.
Yeah.
Right. Our nature, what's here, is not interested in giving energy to that.
Yeah.
Right. It's just, it makes no sense. It's just a draining energy to create the other and hold it away from us. So what does that look like if you feel into that? Just like I was describing how the energy is like this and like this, right? And then the energy moving, right? Instead of being held and opening. And then that is, you're describing the reality of that as it's spoken, as actions are taken, right? It changes everything, right? Because the energy, not in its very simplest, is moving, but that movement is without boundaries, right? It has our energy has no desire to create boundaries. Like if it is, there are boundaries that are no's, that are yeses. Do you know what I'm saying?
I think so. Yeah. Well,
like it's a no, but it's a yes, right?
Yeah.
It's flow,
Yeah.
but it may be a no. So it's like, it's not that no's, it's like a whole revolution of of what boundaries actually are, right? They are actually part, they're an expression of true nature, right? It's not the way we have it and functioning in separation, right?
That's going to take a second to penetrate, but I think, well, that's living in that okayness. A no is as okay as a yes in that space.
Yeah, because I think another story that we can have is we can have, lots of stories with awakening that somehow it means we can't say no or something, that we're, I'll hear the image of like some variation of a person's just like a couch potato, right? Or doesn't know how to make decisions, or how would they, like, without the somebody, how could there be a no, or could there be a decision made? But that's not the truth of it at all. It's the separate self is this energy that's layered on top, right? And when it's felt and open to, then there's tremendous energy, right? There's this tremendous energy that's no longer being dampened, right? Or right, it's like and then it's experienced as a dead energy, kind of moved away from source. And that's, if we were to like feel the energy in our bodies, right? Very, yeah.
And is I don't know how this question is going to come out, but that clearing away, or that uncovering of the true nature, that happens. Is there ever not an uncovering? I guess I'll put it that way. Is there ever a point where there isn't uncovering, like in that example, where it's like that the dead energy is moved away, and then that awakening, it's like it's almost like a rush of energy, of awareness of true state. Is there ever not uncovering happening? Maybe that's I don't know how to put that question.
Yeah, it's a beautiful question, arising, right? So the question is arising. And there are two things I would say, and I really would give it back to you too. So we're gonna, maybe let's do that. Because I could say, I could talk, right? But let's check it out.
God, I hate this. I love it. I don't hate it.
I always find it's just so for you to have your direct experience, right?
Yeah.
It's like,
yes. There is a true nature, and there is true beingness that isn't covered, because what's coming up is there's only the appearance of something covering it up. There's only our resistance and our sense of separation that is covering it up. So the true nature is uncovered.
Yeah, and then isn't it amazing?
Yes.
God damn it. It's just right here, right? And you're looking at me, and it's a beautiful thing, this like looking at the other, right? And asking questions, and this kind of collapsing, right? That the other is your very self, and that like the wisdom here is the wisdom there, right? Like it's not something that we actually have to learn, right? That is just always here, alive and available, right? So the other question you had, does it? Yeah. So I guess so the does it end? Very tender, very gentle.
Well, I think what's coming up is opportunity. The word opportunity. There's an opportunity for direct experience, and there's an opportunity for separation experience simultaneously. And then what comes up is, and this might be where it devolves, then it comes up.
Just kind of feel into it very simply.
Okay, so then it says prioritize. That's that word, prioritize direct experience or prioritize separate experience. But then the question, who is prioritizing? And
So
then
let's go down that. Right.
I can't find, there's nothing. I am comes out. That's what keeps that kind of, because it's like, well, who is prioritizing? And then there's that smile inside. It's try to find the who that is prioritizing it. It doesn't seem to exist.
Yeah.
And that feels like the collapse that you're talking about, where I say prioritize direct experience or prioritize separate experience. It seems one and the same.
Yeah. And then you can even throw the word prioritize away, right?
Yeah. Yes. Right. Yes. Correct. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So in this prioritizing, yeah, and it might be like, even if you feel into it, the word may feel more, for me, I would say it might feel more like curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because prioritizement has a foot in the doer door, right?
Yes.
But then as soon as you feel that, then there's this, a lot of times I like to use the word gravity, so this feeling of and curiosity of, and this almost this like leaning in, right? Or, and that's sort of, what's utilized when I say, let's check it out, or what's inside of that, right? Or like when you're really allowing what is, right? Then there is this felt sense, right?
Yeah.
Of like falling into, right? Something, but it doesn't remain that way, right? It's only like in this transition-y energy of the experience of separation to presence, right? And then all of the things kind of go away because they're not needed anymore. Like it doesn't make sense to hold on to prioritize. It doesn't even make sense to hold on to curiosity, right? You don't need to stay curious, right? Yeah. Curiosity is arising, right? Yes. Right. So this is the other part I would talk about. It kind of like goes back to the beginning question of what Corinne asked is like when, each time that we go in to what is suffering, right? And we have this experience of returning, right? Relaxing into presence and our wisdom coming online. This is an awakening, right? Right. And then, so as, what would recycle as it's being met, right? There's this, all these awakenings, basically, is like, and we don't need to stay attached to even these words. It's just kind of more the energy of it, right? This sort of this, instead of this in this opening over here in this one scenario with your situation that you were talking about with rage, and then it's over here and it's over here, right? It's I get the image of like a dam and a river, right? And then there's a twig that's being come out, and then the water starts trickling through, and then another, right? And then the twigs are all, and then as the river as source, right? Then there's some left, but it's not enough. Sometimes that can happen, right? There's not enough to keep the dam from washing it away, right? So that's sort of like there's not enough to hold separation together anymore.
Wow.
Over apparent time, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah. There's not enough to hold separation together. And that ties with yeah, what's left, what's left that ties together, because there may not even be enough left to keep separation, together. Wow, that is huge.
Yeah, because that destroys a little more in the mind, right? Of like how it should look. But it's really like, because the flow is not, our nature is not, doesn't have it's not like a separate will that makes a decision. It's just more, it's more like gravity.
Yeah.
Right. This is the energy is just very natural, right? And so, and that's that energy of the unconditioned or unconditional. It's kind of like how it translates in our life, like how service shows up, how we bow to the other, right? How there isn't, this openness where our nature really isn't interested in posturing or positioning, right? It just stops making sense. But there's this wisdom that serves in a way that's can look very complicated or very detailed, right? Or everything this is the other really cool thing of when I say, like, what is it that's arising? Everything is arising. Always. It's it's the whole enchilada. That's what's happening all the time, right? Yeah. And you already touched on that or spoke about that, like really directly in your experience, right? That it's this happening on top of it, right? So it's just this revealing to what's already complete, and where actually our imagination or our imagining of where things are created or in this energy that's moved over here is creating this experience of separation. We somehow think that creation is originating there, but it's not. It's just being kind of tried to own it and kind of try to say that it's the origin, but it never was, and it never will be any of
it. That's true. That feels really true. It feels very, very true.
Yeah. And so like the where's the end of it, right? Is when there isn't this, and there's nobody there, right? It's right. There's that it's, do you get what I'm saying?
There's nothing to actually experience the beginning and the end. And that's, so I think that's in that separation, there's a beginning and an end constantly, right? It's a birth and a death constantly. And there's a time period of when that separation is experienced, and then that separation goes away. But yes, it's actually an incomplete question to say, is there even a beginning? Is there an end? There's nothing to experience either, and yet it is experienced constantly.
Yeah. And then, our curiosity can take us beyond just our own individual experience, right? You can look outside and see that everything is changing, right? Everything is in a constant state of change, right? But what is it that is always here, right? That does not change. The unmoved mover. What does not move, moves. What does not move, and then there's what appears as the other, as creation, right? This, right? And so when suffering is met here, what also comes online when you're saying, does it end? What I found was that, you'll hear me say, your suffering is my suffering. Your awakening is my awakening. And that feels the same as this process here, right? Because the other, it stops making sense that the other is the other, right? And so, there's this, what's awakening here, all of a sudden I read the news, right? And there was a period of time where it was just like an elephant on my chest. And when I really opened to, right? So, because it's a unguarded heart, not a guarded heart, but an unguarded heart in our nature. So that opening to all of life, right? So awakening isn't really like a little place that we're separate where we feel bliss. It's really that our heart is open, right, to everything. And then that opening, when that's occurring, is very different than the experience of separation when it's trying to do that, right? It's natural because it's a recovering, right, of our nature, which cannot be separate. Right. And so if you feel into that, that's part of that gravity. It's part of of how it's very natural, right? It's like ending separation here and then it's ending separation everywhere. That's why I say grace comes for you, comes for everything, right? There's nothing else. And so in that deepening, right, or that, energy that moves and feels infinite. It's the separation really, really everything, that's left to negotiate, right? Or to say no. But I would say in my life, as we were talking about with Corinne, things still show up, right? Like today when my father passed away, certain things showed up then that could not have shown up in any other way, right? There was, it's not that when I woke up that everything, there was a lot that awoke then. But the difference is before there was this, am I willing? Is this okay? Can I, there was this, this feeling of choice, where now, when all the Jenga's taken out to enough to where the Jenga falls, right? It would take a lot to resurrect that Jenga, or to put enough back in there, right? To like have that separate experience or arising again. So it arises, but it is just simply, it's just arises and it's okay, right? Which, if we feel this is our natural way we function, right? And so, and there's a very just quick transition that happens when we're having the experience of separation and we're having tenderness, right? It just shifts into this simple functioning. Do you see what I'm saying? And but eventually, it's just too much energy to maintain it, right? And it's not a choice, right? So what happened here was it's just like it ran out of energy. And so, but all of life comes in. So it's not that there's not, I'm thinking of this story about Locke Kelly, who is a friend of Adia's. And I don't know if I'll say the story specifically correctly, but sitting at a table, he was talking to someone, and there was sweating, right? Or like a lot of energy, right? And the energy just was the energy. Like it didn't, the way I understand that particular story was that there wasn't any particular story that came on it that needed to come on it. It was just energy, right? So even though it was very hot or sweaty, and he was talking, that it was just okay. You see what I'm saying? Right? And so he is, okay, go ahead. What are you hearing?
Well, I don't know. What I'm feeling is our relationship to the separation changes dramatically in awakening, which is I think why a lot of these questions, I don't want to say they don't land, but we're not talking about the same universe. There's a universe of separation where it would make sense, because in that limited space, you would say, does it ever go away, or and that makes sense for that space because it is a limited space. But because there is so much tenderness, and because so much has been uncovered, like you said, that it's hard. It would be hard to put enough on top of that to cover it up so much that awareness is snuffed out. It's hard to snuff. How do you? Well, I guess that's the question: is how do you snuff out awareness once awareness is realized?
We'll feel this energy. So if the energy is like this, like he's sitting there at the table, and the energy is open, right? And then what arises, and then the energy does this, right? So what if it doesn't do this, and it's just this, right? And if there's nobody to do this, then if that we haven't got the middleman negotiating it anymore, then it's just allowed, right? And it's like, if it came into his mind as a story, that's okay. And I think it was really cool, at least the way I interpret that story was that nothing really clear came specifically that attached to the energy, and that was okay. Either way, fine. That like whatever was welcome, simply and naturally, right? And it could be going back to a story in your childhood, could just show up in your mind, or it could just be pain body showing up. Like, when my father passed away, there were things that showed up then and later, right? And it's just arising and felt. And some things got really clear, right? There were some things that were held, in my mind as a child that began to reveal themselves, right? And all of that is part of awakening, right? And I don't have any control over that. It's just what's arising, right? And so life continues, right? It's just that we're not negotiating with it anymore. It's welcome, right? And so in that, there's a deepening, right? And I don't have this sense like the curiosity that arises and goes, well, there's no boundaries. There's no way I can know there's any kind of end, right? It kind of starts feeling more like we're the solar system. And then you're like going, oh, we're the solar system. And I'm way out here in Pluto, right? And then through inquiry, I'm like moving towards the black hole, right? And then you've got here's the event horizon, right? Where there's this experience of I don't know what's in there, right? And I know, time and everything stops making sense. All the things that we have in separation, and that I will only know through direct experience, right? That I can't watch it anymore. I can't look at it anymore. That has to be bowed, right? And it's not even a choice because the gravitational pull is just like,
yeah,
right.
Yeah.
And so I'm using it as an example, but it's not really example. It's like everything is the same.
That's
the same things happening.
Yeah.
Like whatever, it's all same. There's this returning, right? And then, just as simple and ordinary as the breath, as we breathe in and out, as simple as like, there's that black hole in the event horizon, and then not black, and there might be a million black holes going into a bigger black hole. I don't know.
You're describing a lot of people's psychedelic experience right now.
Exactly. I'm a big science. I love science. So I go there a lot, right? With that, we use the mind there, right? And then it stops working, And
Yeah.
then we end up in the unknown. And so in our own inquiry, we use our mind to try to figure, and then it stops working. And then we have to go into the, so it's the same, right?
Yeah.
We go into our personal experience of suffering to awaken. And then we find that we are awakening to not just the personal experience, we're awakening to the end of separation of the other, not only the other, but it's that, right, that infinite that comes on, that we are not a cup alone, right? We're not separate from, and we know that in our mind, we know that in our, experience. There's a yes, but there's that crossing that event horizon, right? That when we are fully meeting to what is here, right? That we are crossing that event horizon into the unknown, right?
Yeah.
And, whatever fear, like, we got fear of the black hole, right? And then you're tender with that, right?
Yeah.
Fear of like, what's here, right? Mm-hmm. And then that falls away. And then the ground, we can have lots of words about that we cannot touch what is here, right?
Well, there's an inevitability. There's an inevitability to the unknown, right? And that's the event horizon. And like you can't negotiate with the gravity that's pulling you through. You can't say, oh no, no black hole. You can't. It doesn't work that way. It's like there is an inevitability to that. I think what you're talking about, and that feels.
I have a little thing I'm going to say. Let me see if I can find it. Oh, here it is. A friend posted this, and it's, we cling to what we are trying to get rid of.
Yeah, we do. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That's a doozy.
I love those things that just stop everything. Just puts it right there. So I do have another question before we close, because I wanted to go back, because I feel like you touched on there was a time when there was an elephant on my chest with the news and things like that. And I think there are a lot of people that get stuck there and stay there with the elephant on the chest. So can you speak to that a little bit? If that ended, how it ended, if it just...
I mean, it's similar to when Adia describes his teacher, that there, and I may not get this story correctly because, he's telling, he told the story and it's been a while. But the gist of it was that she would go into retreat and that she would just cry, right? And she did not know, it wasn't rising stories of why, or maybe it was, but from my interpretation story, that it was just crying, and like 2 weeks of silence. And every time she would, for a period of time, maybe it was a couple of years, that when she moved into these periods of silence, it was just crying, right? The whole time, tears. And then it just ended. And so this one is not quite like that, the elephant on the chest. That particular, it started off, well, no, there were different times. There were some times when it was still functioning in separation, and my child was diagnosed with pneumonia, and then she recovered some, and then it was like double pneumonia, and I was sleeping on the bed with her, and there was just this feeling on my chest, right? And it was just feeling it, right? Just feeling it. There was really nothing to be done, right? I mean, there was like water or medicine or whatever. And it was just that feeling like a elephant on my chest. right? And then just that there was, nothing be done but just to feel it, right? And then there, it shifted, and in that shift there was more availability here, right? To yeah, I just yeah. Yeah, because there wasn't anything that was to be done. There wasn't anything that I could do about it, right? It was just, when we are, this idea like if you were in prison, that might make it easier, right? Because you wouldn't have a choice, right? You'd have to surrender, right? And so in these, moments where, the the suffering of saying no, this can't be happening, and then and another one that comes up for me around that was the birth of my child too. And I don't know if you guys heard that story, but it was really made in her. I had back labor, and my long labor, and during the contractions, it was this gift of when I moved away from it, a whole bunch of stuff went on in my head, and there was a lot of resistance. Like, hey, no, stop. Or maybe even go to the thought like I need to go get pills or something or medication. But I didn't get that far. Just the moving out of it and then recognizing that was real suffering. And the suffering, there wasn't suffering into the opening to it.
Mm.
Mm-hmm. Right. It was just pain. Right. And then maybe that word didn't make sense either. It was just, right. It just all moved into total presence. Right. And so with the elephant on my chest with my daughter, it was total presence, right? In these energies that in separation is, this primal resistance of moving away. And really there's tremendous suffering of that. And then the beauty of it is the invitation is that it awakened and began to realign me more discernment, right, for these moments where it would be much easier to turn away, right? Because it was really clear the gift that was received when I move away, I suffer. And it's in all of life, not just in these acute moments. When I move away, there's going to be suffering, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh.
No, that I just see it. I see it with myself. I see it with a lot of people I know because and even on your retreats and things, people get very invested in things going on in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And then what you do is you bring them, okay, what's going on right here now? What's happening here now? I had an experience where I had taught or assisted a retreat. Actually, it was very intense for 10 days at my house. And when I dropped off the last person, I came home and I just started crying, just crying. But I didn't attach a story that it was because of this situation or because it was that. I just simply let the tears come. I just allowed it. I didn't resist it. I didn't create stories. I didn't push. I didn't pull. I just was in it fully. And I sort of had this knowingness to do that. And then when I was done crying, it was a full hour of tears and pacing the house. And I knew it was just energy that needed to release. Or even that is even a story. That was too much. It was just simply allowing it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I feel what you're saying with that because and sometimes I see the opposite so clearly that happens with so many other people, especially since I am on Facebook and Instagram and things like that. I'm very much in the world with people And I see the stories and the resistance happening very strong. And I just use it to help me see clearly. I don't want that.
Right. Right. Yeah. So it's all a mirror, right? Because it's the recognition is right here. Like when that's occurring, you're having the recognition of it in the moment, right? In here, right now. And so that's opened to, right? And then the other becomes your very self. It becomes this very natural shift, right? Just the invitation of this direct experience, because separation, it's just confusing, right? It just you can't grok it. But as we open, it becomes very natural. It's a paradox, but it's in our being, it's not a paradox, right? It's just very natural and ordinary, right? That I am here now, this prior to Alaya, and then it's okay that she comes, that the word she comes, that Alaya comes, that this moment I'm appear as this, and then we finish here, and then I appear as person cleaning up the space and locking it up, and then I walk in my house, and then I'm mother or wife, and those things are coming and going. They're not who I am, right? But they are fully, more fully than ever, fully I am in the moment, right? I remember both with Neelam and with Adia, that deep transmission. When I first met Neelam, very first time, I realized, she loves me totally, completely. And she doesn't even need to meet me. She doesn't need to know what I do. She doesn't need to know my name. And none of that will matter. It is full. It's done. It's complete. Right. And with Adia, in conversations with him, it's like, he's talking to me. And as soon as we walk away from each other, then he's fully there at the next moment, in the next scenario. He's not dragging me with him. He's not dragging, carrying that. It's full and complete in the moment. And that transmission really was like, that's functioning there, not functioning here. And when I woke to that, I was like, that's coming for me now. Closing that gap of what thinking that's experienced there and not here, because that can't be true, right? Same.
That you said authentics, our authentic self a while back in the conversation. There was a authentic, and what was coming up for me at that time when you said it was there's no universal identity to put on what it means to live authentically. And as you kind of just rolled that out, authenticity is living from the present moment with what arises in the present moment. And that whether you're authentically present in separation, or whether you're authentically present in direct experience, whatever phase of beingness that you're existing in, that's your authentic self.
Yeah.
and that's bringing a clarity to your awakening is my awakening, and it brings awareness of, like you say, Neelam loved you without ever having met you, is because love has arisen for her. She has love. She's experienced love. Same for you. you know, that's when you're not in that separation. There is no you I love more than me. Me I love you more than you. There is none of that. And so that picture of authenticity is what's moving, I guess.
Yeah, and then the interesting part is like separation can't really grok this. It's like then there is these unique relationships, right?
Yeah.
Like I do have my daughter and I do have my husband, and it's what is here, and then flowers, right? It's not what here and then we're deriving it from that. It's like here and then everything is born, right? This Alaya is arises, right? Right? Arises, and then the life arises, right? And then it's bowing and meeting, what appears as the other, and it's all the same arising, right?
Yeah. I like that. Yeah.
Right. And so that is that shift of right, like, because we have this energy of sort of like the separate self is containing and receiving, but it's not really like that. It's just really, it's what arises from. Can you feel that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's what's arising, not what it's not arising from. It's just it's arising. I don't know.
Yeah, right. So there's no from. It's just
Yeah.
it's just only this moment, right? There's no past. There's no future. Those are helpful for us to like, in our human conditioning, but that there's just this moment, right? And it's just what's arising right here, right now. And then, I mean, my goodness, how can we not bow?
Yeah.
It's just it's not a choice, right? It's just, right? And serve very self, serve beloved, what arises, bowing. What arises, bowing, True nature. Same. All one, and not even that. That's too much.
Even calling it oneness is too much.
It's just like, that's really, and then it's like, oh, but here and then we speak, and then we attempt.
Yeah.
And what joy.
This shit cracks me up so hardcore.
And can I ask you, and so why is that? I think we touched on it a little while ago, but I'd like to just reconnect here.
What's coming up right now is just the undeniability of not the words that you're saying, but it's this penetrating energy that hits this core and then just explodes, and it's just this like constant, explosion and then retraction over and over again, and it's just so obviously felt sense of truth that it feels hysterical. It's like pure joy. It's just, you know what I mean? It's just, it's so laughable, and not in a condescending way, but just there's nothing more to do than just, that's how it's expressed is through this, joyousness.
Oh, beautiful. Yes. Freedom.
Freedom, because there's nothing to be free from. That's the joy. You know what I mean? That's the joy.
Yeah. Then it's like going, freedom, that's too much. Free, too much.
Yeah.
Like, oh, and then it's like, oh, and then like, om, right? And then silence.
Yeah.
Like, oh, all here, complete. No word.
And that's what I think is funny when you say, and then we show up, and then we say things, and then it goes back, and then we say more things, and we show up different ways. It's like, I don't know. It's
yeah. Then it's like, oh, isn't here it is. This is and it's like, oh, this is embodiment.
yeah.
This is like why? I don't know. Very mysterious.
Well,
I'm not quite
it's magnificent. It's magnificent that this is even that this exists at all. You know, that's where it comes. That's the core of it, is just like, you know, wanting to have answers, wanting to have, and now it's just like, I don't have anything. Well, I have nothing to give. But we'll see what the next moment asks, you know, and then, but it's just this, I don't know. It's fascinating, I guess.
Yes.
And what's arising now is that we've been talking a very long time.
Yeah.
And yet it seems like we just said hello.
I know. Ah, you are my beloved. Your suffering is my suffering. Your awakening is my awakening. I'm at your feet.